Hi, everyone. We're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. As always, I'm Dr. Kristen.
Dr. Erin.
We are continuing our coverage. This is the penultimate episode of Netflix's Unbelievable, and things are coming together.
Yeah, excitingly for all people involved.
So really quickly, just the two parallel stories, we'll give it a thing, and then I want to talk about Marie, and Erin will talk a little bit more about Rasmussen and Duvall. But the two parallel stories here, Marie goes to therapy. This is it sounds like a Berenstain Bears book.
Was it court-mandated therapy?
Court-mandated therapy.
Yeah, it was part of her plea deal.
Part of her plea deal. So she goes to court-mandated therapy, and then in Colorado, Rasmussen and Duvall, they find his house.
They find the Jude.
Oh, that's right. At the end of the last episode was like the shocker thing
where they realized that there were two brothers.
Yeah.
And they like Rasmussen
door,
balls of steel knocks on the door and oh crap, we have two suspects. Yeah.
So in this episode, we see them combing over his house. We see them starting to get some of and then we see the digital processing of the photos. And Dr. Erin's going to talk about that.
Well, yeah, because they eliminate that the brother, the one brother that they thought it was that was in the coffee shop, he had an alibi for 3 of the rapes.
Yep.
And so they decide it is Christopher McCarthy originally.
And not that Ken Cosgrove.
And that they find out that he bought a gun, which was like, because in Colorado you had to because he got a new driver's license. That's what they were. I remember this now. Yeah, it's been a little while since I watched the episode, but they find out that after one of the rapes, that Christopher McCarthy went and got a new driver's license, and they were like, why would you do that? Why would you do this? And then the genius Detective Duvall is like, wait a second, you need a driver's license to buy a gun. And we know that he escalated to then using a gun.
Yeah.
So they find the record of the gun purchase, further evidence, enough to get a warrant to search the house and to arrest Christopher McCarthy, which he goes with nary a peep, I think, knowing that if they are there and arresting him, they must have found something, even though he thinks he's a freaking genius.
And unfortunately, he kind of was for a long time. It took a bigger genius to crack the case. But really briefly, I would like to opine about the therapy that we saw in this episode.
Oh boy, was it beautiful.
Therapy is often shown on television terribly. Social workers and therapists are portrayed terribly. We get all of the stereotypes of so how do you feel about that? Which actually is a really good question. But we're all made fun of for asking it. This one was master, played by the same actress who played Erica Hahn on Grey's Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy, I know. I was like, woo, going deep in the Grey's playbook.
Who I have always loved as a performer, so I'm always glad when she shows up. I don't know her name, I just know her as Erica Hahn.
Sorry, Erica
But every time she shows up, I'm like, it's Erica Hahn! And I'm quite excited.
I only watched the first 6 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, and I was like, yes, Grey's Anatomy! I was excited.
It was great. So, first of all, the therapist understands that Marie doesn't want to be there. And one of the great adages about therapy is that it can't do anything unless you want it to do something. Mm-hmm. So when parents forcing their children to go to therapy sometimes isn't going to work, and that's just life. And instead of that situation, instead of fighting that situation and make Marie talk, the therapist gives Marie back her power. Mm-hmm. Marie gets to be in control of the session, which is how all therapeutic experiences should be. You are in control of the session. But particularly for survivors of personalized violence or violence in general, giving them power back within the confines of a therapeutically safe space is incredibly important part of the healing. Mm. So we see this one long episode, this one long session. Obviously, Marie was silent for the first good chunk of it, which she's allowed to do. She says, can we just sit here in silence? And the woman says yes, and they sit in stone silence as far as we can tell. And then they start talking. And the conversations are about not the rape, but everything's about the rape.
Yeah, she has her talk about a zombie movie that she watched recently.
It's like, we don't really have to talk about anything.
Have you been to the movies lately? And then she geniusly turns it into a conversation, zombies into a conversation about how Marie feels about herself. I was like, wow.
And she was really, it wouldn't surprise me if that therapist is actually a really big zombie aficionado and knows all of it. And because I've done that with people as well, you can tell this is the thing they'll talk about, and that you can make them the expert in the room, and that you can then prove yourself to be a safe person. because every other room that Marie's been in that had an expert in it, the expert broke her heart. Mm-hmm. And this therapist just begins the process, I think, of Marie understanding that she gets to be broken, and that broken isn't bad, and that there is future steps and future hope. The really intense revelation too, in terms of Marie's psyche, because so much of Caitlin Stever's acting has been face acting. We get into her, and at the end she says, you know, if you've asked me if I would do this again, if I would lie again, the answer is yes, I would lie again. I would just lie better.
Yeah, for me, that was what broke me, because she was like, I know what you want me to say is that if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have lied. And she goes, no, I would have lied, and I would have lied better. Because if people are faced with a truth that they find uncomfortable or inconvenient, they don't want to deal with it. And that has been her experience through most of her life. And then those experiences were reinforced by the way she was treated by her foster mom, especially, and then the police and the representations in the criminal justice system. And the fact that this woman sat through her whole story and looked at her and was the first person to say, I believe you, and I'm sorry that happened to you. Like, talk about giving her power. Mm-hmm. It was so, so beautiful. But even this idea that, like, you know, we're all uncomfortable by the horribleness of humanity, whether it's individualized or collectivized. And that Marie, that was one of the lessons Marie took. Oh, it was heartbreaking.
But it's also a really real lesson in that it doesn't. So I think people who are coming to a terrible thing for the first time as a cause believe that if they would just gather everybody and speak passionately enough, everybody would believe the cause because they would see how terrible this is. And it reminded me of the movie Hotel Rwanda, which is the story of a hotel during the 1994 genocide. And the lead actor, the lead guy in it is played by Don Cheadle.
We love you, Don Cheadle.
If you have not seen Hotel Rwanda, please do so immediately. It is actually a very, for one movie, cohesive look at the Rwandan genocide, which is something that I've studied quite extensively and gotten the chance to visit Rwanda on several occasions. But there's a line in that movie that encapsulates human nature for me better than anything else. And Nick Nolte is he's the UN designee. He's playing General Romeo Dallaire. And he and Don Cheadle are talking, and this is the early days of the genocide. It hasn't really like completely ratcheted up yet. It could have been stopped if Kofi Annan, as the UN Secretary General, had stepped in. It easily could have been stopped. It could have been stopped if the United States stepped in. They chose not to. But so at this point, Don Cheadle's character knows the only hope is that people would get angry. Mm-hmm. And so he says to, it's to Joaquin Phoenix. It's to Joaquin Phoenix, the journalist. He says to Joaquin Phoenix, well, surely as soon as they see it, this will change. And he looks at him and he goes, no, they're going to see it. They're going to go, oh, that's really terrible. And then they're going to go back to eating their dinner because that's what humans do. Mm. Until deep, deep tragedy touches us personally, it will always be abstract. It's one of our coping mechanisms as humans, because otherwise we would collapse under the weight of the world on a regular basis. But we are passionate about particular things in our lives that we wish everyone was passionate about, because we love somebody that was affected by it or affected us directly, or we've seen the aftermath. And for Marie to learn that lesson in such a deeply black and white way.
And such a deeply personal way as well. Like, whew, it was rough. It was a rough sit, but it was so beautifully done. Like, if you've been watching our coverage, maybe you've turned off because all we do is say how beautifully done it was in different ways, but we're going to keep saying it because it was.
But it was also a very good narrative juxtaposition with the fact that at the end of the episode, we know that Duvall and Rasmussen have found Marie. So.
Yes. And back to our intrepid, wonderful female detectives, Duvall and Rasmussen. There's some really great moments of quiet vulnerability between the two of them as they are starting to, as they get the warrant, and as I think the scenes investigating the house, and the way Merritt Weaver played it as Duvall were just stunning.
Incredible.
But it's really interesting because like they get the warrant and Duvall's like, oh, I'm excited. Let's go. Come on, Rasmussen. And Rasmussen's like, no, I've got like backlogs of phone calls to make. And she's like, what?
That's weird. You don't want to do this?
You don't want to go? You don't want to celebrate? Like, we got the guy. This is amazing. We're going to go through the whole house and find all this horrible stuff that we can put him away for. And she's like, phone calls. And it strikes you as really, really weird at the beginning. And then her coworker, who I never remember, Rasmussen's coworker, looks at her and goes like, since when do you not like want the glory? What's that about? And it gets revealed at the end of the episode that like she wanted Grace to have the win because she knew like what a big deal it was as a young detective to get that kind of win. And talk about mentoring. Like, who's not a mentor? She's a mentor.
Yeah,
it was a beautiful moment of just like the grace of letting Grace win. But just recognizing that like that would have such a boost for her as a woman detective in this hyper masculinized work environment, to let her have the congratulations for the work. It was so, so great. But the scenes in the house where Grace is going through.
Isn't Grace Rasmussen's name?
It is.
What's Merritt Weaver's character's name? I just remember Duvall.
Oh, Grace let her have the win. Yeah. So Grace had the grace. I don't remember Duvall's first name, but anyway, when Duvall, excuse me for mixing that up, Grace Rasmussen and unknown first name. Karen Duvall. I think so. I could look it up on IMDb, but it doesn't really matter. So Duvall like going through the house and like finding all the evidence. And this is when like they took it so slowly. And I think cinematography-wise, it was so brilliantly done because like to understand
methodical and plotting,
like the impact of how much evidence this and like how many women there were. And they find the camera that was taken from the first rape victim in Colorado, the pink cyber shot. So then you start to like the showing you that was like, right, we've got this guy, we're gonna find more stuff. But like when she sees the hard drive,
and it's not connected,
it's not a hard drive, it's a amp.
Yeah.
And she was like, did you find a guitar or anything? And he's like, no. And she opens it up and it's like,
it's all the underwear
bagged. And it was just like, you know, you thought that was a throwaway comment we were talking about 4 episodes ago when they were saying like, well, some men take women's underwear, and like, and bless Elias, Elias was like, well, can I search for reports of women stolen underwear? And they were like, oh, sweet summer child.
Let's talk to you about feminism. And no.
And the other really, really important moment in this for the two detectives is when their tech person gets into the hard drives and finds the photographs. And they don't need to look at them, right? He's already confirmed that they've got witness matching for the victims and survivors. Like these two women don't, for their jobs, have to look at these. But as humans and as detectives and as women, they have to. And they have to, the act of bearing witness
is massive.
Is so, so big. And to watch them sit down and they're both like stone-faced, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And they're clicking through and they're clicking through and they're clicking through. And one of them cringes and one of them twitches and like so subtly, but like you can see it. And then at the end, they come across, he finds on a separate hard drive a lot of corrupted files, but one file and some photographs of a person that doesn't match. And this is when we get that they have found Marie because he took photographs of her ID, put it on her stomach and took pictures of her student ID. And so they find this elusive, unknown first victim that is Marie, thus setting the stage for episode 8, in which we get to see Marie's story finally resolved. But yeah, like the pacing of this episode, because we're not super fans of real slow television, middle distance television, we call it,
where people just stare a lot.
There's a lot of like slow pans.
Not our thing.
Like
we have one of our best friends that's her favorite kind, and so I'll hear about a show and be like, hey, Britt, you should watch this. I'm never watching this.
It's too slow. But when it's done well, it's so impactful. And this was like the methodicalness of it. That's not a word, but I'm saying it is, was just chef's kiss.
Yep.
Another genius thing to add to the list of accolades that we have for the show. But that's everything, I think, for episode 7. The 2 main things that we wanted to talk about that came out of it. And gear up, kids, because we've got episode 8 next.
We got episode 8 and we can't wait. We'll see you then.
Bye.